Today on LawNext, a coronavirus success story of a sort, how the New York State Bar Association partnered with two legal tech companies to rapidly build a workflow and launch a website to help those who lost their jobs due to the pandemic get free legal help to pursue unemployment benefits. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. And we've got a full roster here today of guests. Joining me today are Hank Greenberg, the president of the New York State Bar Association and a shareholder in the law firm Greenberg Traurig. Kristen Sunday, co-founder of the pro bono management platform Paladin. And Jack Newton, co-founder and CEO of Clio. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment. But first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. Welcome to all of you.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Happy to do it. So on April 27th, the New York State Bar Association launched this site to help people file unemployment claims and get legal help with those claims. Hank, the story of how this came together is pretty interesting. That's what we're here to talk about. But what was the genesis? What was the problem? What was the issue that you set out to solve?
Well, here we sit in New York State, the epicenter of COVID-19 for the nation, New York City in particular. And a few weeks before the date you identified, Bob, we as a bar association, in partnership with our state court system, made a judgment that we were going to build out a statewide pro bono network of lawyers. From all the way upstate, Niagara Falls, to as far down south as you can go. Montauk, New York, we were going to try to find volunteers because we anticipated when the crisis passed, we would see an unprecedented surge or demand for legal services in New York as a result of COVID-19. And then one day, the governor of the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo, his office reached out to us at the State Bar Association and asked if we could help them with the crisis that New York has experienced in terms of unemployment. Right now, Bob, as you and I are talking, there are 2 million New Yorkers who are receiving unemployment insurance benefits, depression-era levels of unemployment. And at the time when the governor's office reached out to us in April, the New York State Department of Labor, which administers the unemployment insurance program in New York, through no fault of its own, because who could possibly have anticipated COVID-19,
right.
the impact on the economy, its website crashed. Its toll-free 800 number was backed up by several hours. Thousands, tens of thousands of people wanted to apply for unemployment insurance benefits, and the state was struggling to sort of meet that demand.
Yeah.
They reached out to us because some number of people who apply for unemployment insurance benefits have those claims denied. And there's evidence that people who are represented by counsel in the appeal process fare better than those who weren't. And they asked us, well, can you stand up a pro bono network to help those people? And can you do that, say, in the space of a week? Understanding, like I said before, 2 million New Yorkers today are receiving unemployment insurance benefits.
Yeah, amazing.
So thanks to the wisdom and genius of our executive director, Pamela McDevitt, who over the years has acquired an expertise in who truly is the best and the brightest in legal tech. She reached out to Jack Newton of Clio, and Jack in turn reached out to Kristen from Paladin and said, I think she might have begged, please help us. Because the only way to solve this problem, given this extraordinary volume of people who needed legal assistance, couldn't afford a lawyer, and matching them with a large volunteer fleet of attorneys and doing that in real time, that riddle could only be solved through technology. And I am eternally grateful to Jack and Kristen. These are truly giants in the legal tech world, as you know, and their service, their volunteerism was extraordinary because literally in the space of 2 weeks, these two legal tech geniuses produced an online innovative web service that has allowed us, one, to be able to recruit at this point over 800 lawyers who have volunteered their services to help people whose claims have been denied, and to match them with the lawyers. And several hundreds of people in real time have asked for this service. We've been matching them. None of this would have been possible without Jack and Kristen.
Well, I'm guessing Pam didn't have to beg too hard, knowing Jack and Kristen. But before I get to them, I just wanted to follow up on one point, which is you had the New York State Bar had already been in the process of this sort of virtual, rather digital transformation for a period of time, and in a way, this was maybe a culmination or a certain a natural extension of what you'd already been doing, right?
It really was. For the last year, our single highest management administrative priority at the New York State Bar Association was, as we described it, to build a virtual bar center, to effect a digital transformation, to use your phrase. And we have devoted an extraordinary amount of resources to transforming our website and all of our technological infrastructure that was virtually no pun intended, from the Stone Age. And we have expended extraordinary resources in order to get there, to reinvent our website, and to do all of these things. And as tragic and awful as COVID-19 has been for all of us, we actually completed the lion's share of the work in terms of that digital transformation just a few weeks before COVID-19 struck. As a result, we were in position to be able to move from a physical and actual platform to a virtual platform. And over the course of the last 2.5 months, it really has been, thanks to that digital transformation, the finest hour of the New York State Bar Association. We have produced over the course of the last few months more services, more continuing legal education. We reinvented our social network platforms. We reinvented our email, e-blast to our more than 70,000 members. We transformed our website into a COVID-19 resource. And only through the power of technology, we were able to do that. And only through the good fortune of the wisdom of our executive director were we in a position just a matter of weeks before COVID-19 to be able, when we physically had to leave the bar center and do all of our work, a staff of more of 100 remotely, to be able to effect that move from actual to virtual seamlessly.
So, Jack, how hard did Pam have to beg to get you involved in this project?
She didn't have to beg me, really, Bob. She did call me and say, I have a crazy ask to make of you. And I wasn't really sure what that crazy ask was, but she described this impending tsunami of legal needs that New York residents would have as it relates to this unemployment benefit and the legal needs that surround that, and asked me if I could help create a scalable solution for both intaking those New Yorkers that need legal assistance, and then matchmaking them with volunteer lawyers that are willing to service those legal needs. And the wheels that started turning for me were, this sounds like a really interesting opportunity to deploy Clio's tools, in particular Clio Grow and Clio Manage, into a brand new use case that we've never really explored before. And what was really interesting was the timing of this discussion. It did feel like the stars really lined up for us on this front. The timing of the discussion was really apt, as I was a week or so into working with Kristen already on building a partnership between Clio and Paladin, where we could offer our joint services to legal service organizations. And Clio, along with LegalZoom, was also helping fund the really remarkable work that Kristen and her team were doing with the ABA at a national level. So this was, when Pam's call came in and her ask came in, I realized this is actually a really unique opportunity to take these puzzle pieces that were Clio Grow for the intake side, Clio Manage for the volunteer lawyers to use to manage the cases, to create an end-to-end secure data pipeline for all of the case details, all the way from intake to the volunteer lawyer doing the work, with Paladin sitting in the middle doing the matchmaking between the volunteer lawyers and the cases that were being submitted through this intake portal. And I went back to my team with this ask and said, here's what we've got to build. And the original timeline was actually a week. Here's what we've got to do on, this was Monday that I called the meeting. Here's what we've got to build by Friday. Can we pull this off? And we had a prototype. And
had you called Kristen at this point, or you were going to fill her in later?
I called Kristen over the weekend. So the conversation was with Pam on a Friday. I talked to Kristen over the weekend. I came back to Pam on Sunday and said, I think we can do this. I'm going to assemble the teams on Monday. And it really felt like, for fans of the Avengers movie, like an Avengers Assemble kind of moment, where we had a great team of people from NISBA, a passionate group of developers and product managers from the Clio side, and similarly from the Paladin side, that all just got together and said, let's figure out how to build this over the course of a week. And our teams worked around the clock with this backdrop that Andrew Cuomo, in his daily briefing, at some point is going to say, New Yorkers that need legal assistance can go to this website. And the knowledge that in a state the size of New York, that could mean millions of people literally hitting this intake form and needing to get triaged in some kind of workflow within NISBA. And so building the thing was one challenge, and then building it for the true scale that we anticipated was another. And the teams stepped up and delivered in a way that made me super, super proud. And by the way, one of the reasons I felt a huge debt of gratitude to the New York State Bar Association is way back in 2009, 2010. They became the very first member benefit for Clio. They became the first state-level bar association to endorse Clio as a cloud solution provider, and in fact Clio became the exclusive cloud provider for practice management that was recommended by the New York State Bar Association. And we've always had a great relationship with the New York State Bar Association. And aside from serving access to justice, and I think really helping realize our mission statement at Clio to transform the practice of law for good, this debt of gratitude was really something I was happy to have some way to repay 10 years later.
And I'm going to get to Kristen, who's been sitting here very quietly for all this time. But one follow up on that, Jack, is I know this, and a lot of listeners to my podcast will know this because you've been on talking about it. But maybe you want to also just explain the commitment that Clio made to COVID relief as this pandemic started as this pandemic started.
We right as the pandemic was settling in late March, we launched the COVID-19 Relief Initiative, which was a $1 million relief initiative to help transform law practices to deal with the pandemic and to help equip the legal industry to go through this unbelievable amount of transformation that was going to be required to survive the challenges that COVID-19 presented. And this for us meant earmarking funds to go to nonprofit initiatives. And in fact, it was ironically enough, or coincidentally enough, this announcement of the COVID-19 Relief Fund that was the catalyst for Kristen reaching out to me about whether we might fund this ABA project that Paladin was undertaking. And we did end up doing that along with LegalZoom. But we've also funded millions of dollars worth of financial relief in the form of in-kind Clio licenses given away for a discount or for free for law firms that just need to make this evacuation to the cloud. We've given direct financial assistance and access to accountants, for example, that can help lawyers navigate the PPP program and other financial relief programs. So this $1 million COVID-19 relief initiative was obviously a really important moment for us over the course of the last couple of months, and I think has catalyzed so many great things and allowed technology, I think, to permeate the legal industry in a way that it hasn't been able to over the last 10 years. And we've seen, as I've often framed, 5 or 10 years worth of technological change in the legal industry happen in 5 or 10 weeks. And now I actually think, with the benefit of hindsight, that may have been a conservative estimate. When you look at what's happening with the courts, for example, it's change that maybe would have never happened without a forcing factor like COVID-19. If you look at the way that the New York State Bar Association is stepping up to meet this demand, without an externality like COVID-19, this is probably not an evolution that the Bar Association would have gone through. So I think it's very interesting to see the profound ways that so many organizations, so many law firms, and so many courts are pivoting to in the COVID-19 era. And I'm certainly optimistic that many of these changes will be enduring and permanent changes on the industry.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, let's continue this week's interview. So, Kristen, how did you, what was your initial reaction when Jack approached you about this? And I hadn't realized you were kind of already working with Clio on some other projects before this time. I knew about the ABA project, of course, because you and I talked about that a few weeks ago. But so how did you fit into this, and what did you do when Jack reached out?
Yeah, of course. So as Jack alluded to, the stars really did align on a number of these different projects that allowed us to be able to scale this technology as quickly as we did. So just for a little bit of context for those who aren't familiar with Paladin, our mission is to increase access to justice by helping legal teams run more efficient pro bono programs. So traditionally, we work with large law firms and in-house corporate teams to streamline their programs, and we think a lot about how do we increase engagement while decreasing a lot of the administrative friction and the back and forth in making attorneys aware of opportunities and then seamlessly connecting them with referring organizations to do that matching and continue with the casework. So we had started, I want to say about 2 weeks before this project came to light, working with the Clio and LegalZoom to partner with the American Bar Association, their disaster legal services program, to build the first nationwide disaster relief pro bono portal. And we were pretty heads down on that project because we wanted to get it up and running as soon as possible. It was really our first big deviation away from our core product. And we were figuring out a lot of the nuances around kind of jurisdictional considerations, making sure that we could scale the technology to accommodate kind of the volume of client intake and volunteers that we would be able to handle through the system, and then adapting it for different bar association use cases after that. So it really worked out well, and that we were already kind of thinking about all of these considerations when Jack came to me a couple weekends ago. And among the team, it seemed like a no-brainer way for us to really advance our mission in connecting more pro bono attorneys with clients in need. And we had the tech foundation to start scaling and iterating. And we really see this as kind of an initial starting point. And we're continuing to work with NISBA, local legal services organizations, to tweak the product as we go to make sure it's as efficient as possible for both sides of the need there.
Is there a correlation between the New York State Bar platform that you built and the ABA platform that you built in any way?
I guess the main correlation would just be kind of the volume of signups and interest areas that we're seeing. What's really nice about having consistent technology across the two is that we're able to share information and data between the portals. So for example, we've been able to share the NISBA opportunities on the ABA portal in order to increase awareness and visibility. I know the ABA just pushed it out last week, and they've been doing a really amazing an amazing job of helping us get out the word. And so we've been able to see a ton of signups through them and through NISBA. And actually, Hank, there's been an update since we last chatted about it, but we now have over 1,000 volunteers in the system in New York just over the course of a few weeks, which is truly incredible.
And how many people have used the system? Do you know?
So that's on the Clio side in terms of intake. I know they've seen hundreds of people coming through, and I know that a few hundred of them have been matched.
Okay. Yeah, I've got some up-to-date stats on that front, Bob. We've had almost 600 intakes over the course of the last few weeks, and 400 of those cases have been assigned out to those volunteer lawyers.
That's great. So you got these three pieces together. You all talked over the weekend. What were the challenges in getting this out as quickly as you wanted to get it out?
I can speak to the Clio side of the equation first, maybe. And I think as the intake side that we were architecting for potentially millions of cases hitting us, and that tsunami may still be coming. I think what's important to note is we're still in the early days of the need for access to justice, and we needed to build for the tsunami. We knew it eventually hit. The water's gone out. We're just not sure when that wave's coming. And so we built with a very extensible data pipeline in mind, where we had an intake form hosted on Clio Grow, hosted in the cloud, that could scale to millions of intakes. And the team was load balancing and load testing this to make sure it could hold up in the most severe and high demand situations. And as Hank pointed out, if you fall down when the public is pointed at a resource you're offering, it's in a very visible and public and potentially embarrassing way if you don't stand up to that. So this was...
Especially when the governors asked you to do it.
Especially when the governors asked you to do it. And it was very interesting. Some of these planning calls, mapping out exactly what we had to do. We had leadership from the New York State Bar Association on the call. We had Hank and Pam and Kristen and her leadership team, the Clio leadership team. We had the chief of staff from Andrew Cuomo's office on the call, mapping out how this whole thing is going to work, how the decision tree that consumers could walk through to understand whether they were eligible for legal assistance, how that would work, how would the intake form for Clio Grow work. We were deploying Clio Grow into a brand new use case, which was effectively with the New York State Bar Association triaging these cases and deciding which cases need to get referred out to one of the volunteer lawyers that have been recruited through the Paladin platform. And finally, we realized that the lawyers that end up getting recruited out into the volunteer lawyer use case needed a secure practice management system to actually administer the work and to deliver their work product to the client. And we saw a huge risk, by the way, and there's been a big spike in cybersecurity issues over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. We needed to make sure that the data that was being exchanged was done so in a highly secure way, and in a way that was impervious to the various, you've covered some of these, Bob, but the ransomware attacks and everything else we've seen over the course of the last couple of months was really a significant threat to this data. So we wanted to ensure that the data custody pipeline was really cleanly mapped out and that we could ensure the security of the sensitive data that might be submitted through these intake forms. So I think the big challenge was just mapping out that flow chart that you can kind of see floating in your mind of all those pieces that we needed to put together, and getting our teams aligned around that, and then just executing like crazy for a week to build it. And I think we got to the alignment piece pretty quickly, and the looming threat of the governor mentioning the site on one of his daily briefings was a huge motivating factor to just making sure that we, number one, did the work well and did the work in a scalable and secure way. And I think we succeeded in that. I was really excited to see, I think we had daily calls, if not more frequent, over the course of that whole week. It has turned into a blur in my mind, but
Yeah, sure.
we were talking constantly. We were text messaging back and forth constantly, and the team stepped up and really delivered something remarkable in a short amount of time.
Yeah. Kristen, what about from where you sit? As you say, this is all a little bit outside your normal course. You're already working on the ABA project. What was the challenge for you?
Right. So I think just taking into consideration all of the different parties that were involved in this project was really important to us. So this would not have been possible if it weren't for the collaboration of NISBA and Clio and Paladin. I have to give a shout out to our engineering team and product team who really came together quickly and figured out how the pieces did fit together, but also local experts on the ground. So we were consulting with legal services organizations, DOL, to really understand, what needed to happen and be incorporated into this product before launch. So just thinking about those product considerations, the UX, UI, and how they on the Paladin side kind of overlapped with what we were building in partnership with the ABA. Those were all really important things for us to be thinking about all the time.
Yeah. Hank, unemployment is a very immediate and important need right now, but obviously it's in some ways only the tip of the iceberg of that tsunami Jack was talking about. What is the bar thinking about, looking at, doing to prepare for the rest of that tidal wave that's going to be coming?
Well, the enormous value of what Jack and Kristen did was create for us a template, a stencil, if you will, for us to build out our pro bono network so it can meet the anticipated demand in a variety of legal fields. So let me give you a few examples. In New York, when you have 2 million unemployed people, you have a lot of people who can't pay rent. New York City, the other metropolitan areas around the state of New York, Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo. Right now, you are seeing a pent-up, ever-building, the floodwaters rising of landlord-tenant disputes with tenants who simply have no capacity to pay. Now, Governor Cuomo has imposed a moratorium on any eviction proceedings until August 20. But we have assembled a blue ribbon commission to sort of do two things. One is stand up a pro bono network just for that category of cases, landlord-tenant disputes, primarily representing tenants who can't afford an attorney, and also developing a dispute resolution model that will allow between now and the end of the summer the capacity of people to resolve these disputes. We expect in the next few weeks to be announcing both the formation of this new pro bono network. This is going to require not just hundreds, but thousands of lawyers. And the genius, the contribution that Jack and Kristen have made by creating this template is that we can now build out on our website and stand up a new module that addresses housing disputes. We're also going to be rolling out other similar kinds of modules for creditors' claims, domestic violence claims. COVID-19 has just given rise to all manner of new kinds of lawsuits, and the sheer volume of litigation is enormous, and it's disproportionately going to impact the poor and minorities. Let me also say this about what Jack and Kristen has done. They may have found the key to the kingdom of solving the access to justice problem. I'm actually optimistic that they have. Before COVID-19 in New York and around the nation, we had a justice gap and we had an access to justice crisis. And it was clear beyond any doubt that institutional legal service providers, legal aid societies, who do incredible work, their resources were strained before COVID-19. They were working beyond capacity even then. And they were not able to meet the needs of the poor, the working poor, and even the middle class. And so I was recently at a meeting of the American Bar Association, their past meeting, the mid-year meeting in Austin, Texas, where a resolution was enacted. The New York State Bar Association, I'm proud to say, led it, about the importance of dealing with the justice gap, which is now, after COVID-19, a justice Grand Canyon, and finding new and innovative ways to address that crisis. One of the things Kristen and Jack have done and taught us by their example is that technology is clearly, if not the answer, a fundamental answer to trying to meet that demand. And what they have done through the model they've created that we're now going to be building out in other fields of the law, I am enormously optimistic as a paradigm shift in the way people think about addressing the access to justice crisis and solving it. And we have never needed that kind of solution, that kind of technological wisdom now, today, more than ever before.
Well, you're preaching to the choir on that point. I think with this group here, but actually that was kind of the next question I wanted to ask, which is what are the lessons that we can take away from this? Clearly, the fact that technology is an important tool in addressing the access to justice crisis, but I'm wondering if it also just says something about our ability or the need for us to work together to solve these kinds of crises. I mean, to me, it seems pretty cool, both in this case and in a few other cases we've heard about, that it's not just Clio doing its thing. It's not just Paladin doing its thing. It's companies coming together with organizations to really, tackle a problem in a rapidly iterated way and come up with a solution. But
I think that's something that we see a lot at Paladin, just being focused on the pro bono side, is especially during great times of needs, lawyers really do step up. And we've seen a surge in interest in pro bono and folks wanting to get involved, and they just need a really easy way to do it. So technology we see as being kind of an infrastructure, a support system to really support legal services organizations. They're the experts doing all this incredible work on the ground, and we want to help surface their opportunities, ways that folks can get involved, any trainings and materials that they can provide to recruit the right volunteers for their matters. And then on the attorney side, we really want to make these pro bono opportunities accessible and go where attorneys are, which is online, on their phones. We want to understand their interests and their backgrounds, which is why we created a variety of different opportunities to post on the NISBA portal. So attorneys can search and filter based on those interests. And now, even though we have 1,000 plus attorneys in the system, they've applied for over 3,000 opportunities total across the board. So they want to get involved with different areas. And we have a great panel of additional volunteers at the ready to help with other practice areas. But we really want to facilitate the ease with which they can get involved, submit their information, and connect with those organizations and get started as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I mean, attorneys often want to be able to help and they just don't know how to do it, or there is no easy way for them to figure out how to do it. And therefore they do nothing until something comes along. But Jack, what about for you? Are there kind of lessons in this, takeaways in this? What have you learned by going through this?
Yeah, it's actually been hugely energizing for me and the team. And for me personally, I've become a lot more involved in the pro bono side of the equation. Just a confluence of a few different things over the course of the last 3 months, but I was invited to and joined the Pro Bono Net board in New York, coincidentally, before all of this transpired. And in fact, I was supposed to have the first board meeting of Pro Bono Net in New York the week that things really started going sideways, around the week of March 16th. So unfortunately that didn't happen in person, but it did happen virtually. Clio itself is starting to get more actively involved with legal service organizations or legal aid organizations. And we're actually in talks with Paladin about how do we partner, at a technology level in that LSL use case, which by the way is not totally dissimilar from the New York State Bar Association use case. And obviously this effort with NISBA has been really eye-opening in terms of how we can use technology in maybe a more direct way than we previously thought to help bridge this access to justice gap, or I like the way Hank put it, what is becoming an access to justice Grand Canyon. And I believe that technology is part of that equation, but if you think about it, what it is really at the end of the day is this thing that, if it's doing its job properly, is helping connect the massive demand that exists out there. I mean, even pre-COVID-19, we've all seen the World Justice Data Project that 77% of legal needs that consumers experienced went unmet by lawyers and legal professionals. So on the demand side, we already saw the fact that most consumers are not seeing their legal needs met by lawyers. On the supply side, we see 80+% of lawyers telling us that they need more clients and need more work. And in fact, they're willing to work maybe for lower hourly rates than they typically are. And especially, I think, when we recontextualize that data with the benefit of looking at through the COVID-19 lens, we maybe have lawyers that are more able than ever to deliver legal services on a lower cost basis, thanks to the fact that they don't have these massive overhead costs in the form of rent and leases. They maybe have a more efficient cost structure because they can operate as solos or small firms or boutique firms instead of very large law firms with some of the very large overhead that go along with those firms. I believe we'll see a structural reduction in the cost to deliver legal services, see that translated through to the end consumer. And I think we'll see this technology adoption acceleration that we've seen in tools like Zoom, for example, permeate other areas of the profession that can get more productive. And an example would be something simple like document automation. I believe we'll see more lawyers figuring out how to use efficiency improving tools like document automation to better meet this unprecedented need that they're about to face when this tsunami hits. And some of these tools that maybe should have been table stakes for the profession a decade ago are finally going to be adopted in a more broad way. I think we'll see client portals. I think we'll see Zoom meetings. I think we'll see e-signatures. I think we'll see all these efficiency creating technologies adopted, again, out of necessity, maybe rather than just being a tactical improvement. But those are all going to be enduring changes for the profession. And we're starting to see it in courts adopting tools like Zoom and so on. So for me, it's been, a weird silver lining to talk about, but it's like the future arrived early as a silver lining to all of obviously the steep humanitarian toll and the steep economic toll that we're paying for this silver lining is a significant one. But I do believe we're seeing a decade plus of legal transformation accelerated. And I think the little microcosm that we see with this New York State Bar Association project, I think is, as you pointed out, Bob, reflective of other areas of innovation we're seeing around the country as it relates to the delivery of legal services. And it's really encouraging to see.
Yeah. Hank, something I wanted to ask you about is just what this suggests for the role of bar associations in addressing access to justice. I mean, obviously, the ABA under the current president, Judy Perry Martinez, has exercised a lot of leadership in trying to address these issues. I mean, do you think that bars are doing enough or can find a model here to follow in terms of using technology to help get at that problem? Because I'm not hearing a lot from some of the state bars on that front.
Well, I'm very proud of the New York State Bar Association because we recognized, certainly over the course of the last couple of years, that we had to transform ourselves. We had to reinvent ourselves in order to be relevant, especially for millennials. We needed to meet them where they live, not where I live, where I want them to live, but in the cloud, but online, but on social networking. We had to deliver services differently. So we understood that and affected that transformation, as I said before. But your point, Bob, I think is exactly the right one. If bar associations are going to flourish, if they're going to grow, if they're going to be relevant, then they need to embrace technology, and not in a begrudging way. They need to own it. They need to make it part of what they do and how they deliver services. And I will tell you, thanks to the extraordinary work of Kristen and Jack, I believe what they have done will make a seismic difference, not just for the New York State Bar Association, but for others. Someone once said, and I think they said it well, no crisis should go wasted. And Jack's right. There's a silver lining here that, of course, none of us wished that it took a crisis or a tragedy to discover, but nevertheless, it is there. And what we have achieved, and I think Jack made this point and Kristen did as well before, is that so many of the obstacles, so many of the roadblocks on the access to justice front that a bar association would have otherwise confronted simply fell by the wayside because of COVID-19. By that I mean, there is scarcity in terms of resources available to institutional legal service providers. That's out there. That's always a concern. Bar associations have always been in the forefront of advocating for that. But what Kristen and Jack have sort of discovered is that bar associations can be catalysts, can be facilitators to assist institutional legal service providers in ways they couldn't imagine. Let me give you an example. One thing the New York State Bar Association can do that no legal aid society can do, because of our statewide reach, because of our robust communications capacity, is we can create and recruit volunteer attorneys in ways that a regionalized legal aid society couldn't. So a call was put out to find lawyers for unemployment insurance, and lo and behold, 800 lawyers show up. Last week, as we're building out our new front, based on the platform Kristen and Jack created for people who are the victims of COVID-19 and have small estates who want to administer their wills. These people don't have any money, but nevertheless, they have enough resources to have a will administered. They need legal support. We put out a call for lawyers. Lo and behold, 500 lawyers showed up. Why is that valuable and transformative? Why can we do that, by the way, in ways that others can't? Well, we can take those volunteers and we can get them to the regional legal aid societies that are desperate for volunteers. We can, on a statewide basis, have clients come to us in greater numbers than any regionalized legal aid society can because of our communications, because of our ability to advertise. And we can support, assist, facilitate legal aid societies in ways they couldn't have fathomed before COVID-19. So your question, Jack, puts your finger on exactly what I think is the future in terms of access to justice in that crisis. I think Kristen and Jack have seen the future. They've seized it and embraced it. I'm privileged and proud that the New York State Bar Association, and enormously grateful, are the beneficiaries of their genius and creativity. We have an executive director that sees eye to eye and herself as a technological visionary. So Jack, your question is right. This is the future of access to justice. I think state bar associations are going to play a leading role in making that future come to life.
Yeah. Kristen, what else? I mean, Jack alluded to the fact that you may be working together on other projects. What else we're going to see coming? What else are you working on?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And we have actually had so many additional opportunities come our way as a result of this portal, because I think folks are seeing how effective that it can be. So working on portals for some additional states now, for specific initiatives that are spinning up across the country in response to COVID, building additional tools for legal services organizations to facilitate their volunteer workflow and referral processes. And then, of course, getting back to business on the firm front and the corporates and making sure that we're supporting their work, especially as they're getting more attorneys involved in projects around the country than ever before. So we want to make sure that we're helping them do that in as easy a way as possible.
I know we got to wrap this up. Jack, any final thoughts on this before we call it a day?
No, I think we've covered the project and what we accomplished in the right amount of depth here. I can't think of anything to add, Bob. It's been a great discussion, and again, we were just super proud to be invited to the table to help create something new here and build a workflow that I think we looked at it as we put it into production and thought, will all this work? And it has worked for hundreds of cases already, and we're only going to scale upward from here. So really satisfied to see an idea go from, an idea on the drawing board to something deployed in a new environment and see it all stand up and work really well. And to the response from both consumers and from the volunteer lawyers be so positive.
Well, a big thanks to all of you for taking the time. Congratulations on this initiative. You've really done something pretty cool here and set a model for other people to follow. And
thanks, Bob.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So we've been talking with Hank Greenberg, president of the New York State Bar Association, Kristen Sonde, co-founder of the pro bono management company Paladin, and Jack Newton, co-founder and CEO of Clio. Big thanks to Populous Radio for doing the production and editing work on this show. That's it for this week. This is Bob Ambrogi.